I am so glad you convinced me that the family car should be the Defender 110. It is so beautiful inside. It's so comfortable and it just feels indestructible.
Yes, it really is. I've been waiting a long time for the new model to come out. The Defender 110, I'm telling you, it's my favorite car of all times. It's my third one. You know, I have stories of going off road. The guy managed the group. He was like, "What are you doing in this beautiful car?" I'm like, "I'm going off road." He's like, "Are you sure? Because you can use one of ours." And then they look like Mad Max cars. I'm like, no, we're going to do this. And he was shocked.
Wow. Well, it's great because the Defender has been reimagined for 21st century adventure, and its unparalleled off-road ability as well as its robust interior are invaluable whether you're headed towards uncharted territory or just a weekend of exploration. The Defender 110 tackles challenging surroundings with absolute confidence. The SUV conveys strength outside and in, featuring peerless technology like an intuitive driver display and an award-winning infotainment system. That's my favorite part, to keep you connected no matter where the journey takes you. Adventure is unique to everyone, and so is the Defender. Choose from the two-door Defender 90, the four-door Defender 110, or the larger Defender 130 with the ability to seat up to 8 passengers. You'll find uncompromising performance in all three. So pack up and go even further with the Defender 110. Learn more at LandRoverUSA.com/Defender.
These days, we're all investors, trying to be smart with our money despite our worst impulses. But at iShares, we believe that deep down inside of every investor is a better investor. One that's just waiting to be let out. Explore iShares ETFs and insights and let your best investor out. Visit iShares.com for more information.
This isn't your average business podcast, and he's not your average host. This is the James Altucher Show.
So I'm going to talk about 21 powerful persuasion techniques that I personally use. So I've had on a lot of people about the topic of persuasion because, let's face it, we all want to convince people to agree with us all the time. Nobody should ever disagree with any of us about anything. That is intolerable. You need, though, sometimes a little extra boost, like some sort of techniques or persuasion theory to at least argue your point or make a convincing argument or put your best foot forward when trying to convince people. And again, I've had on Robert Cialdini, who wrote the book Influence. I've had on Scott Adams many times, who wrote Win Bigly about Donald Trump's persuasion techniques. I've had on Bill Beteet and Brendon Lemon about their book, The Power Bible, and talked about their persuasion techniques. But recently, I had an opportunity to engage in a debate. Like, it was an official debate that I was invited to participate in. When I was preparing for the debate and when I was in the debate, I noticed that I was using a lot of techniques over and over again, in particular techniques that I've been using for decades. And these work not just for debates, but they work for any kind of argument, any kind of discussion, any time when you're trying to convince someone of something that you passionately believe in. Anytime, it's also good as defense. So if someone's trying to manipulate you, it's good to recognize and practice these techniques whenever you can, to recognize when somebody else is trying to manipulate you. And so I figure I will go over these techniques that I used and how I've used them, specific examples, and how you could use them. And so, but first off, I just want to mention, is it just me, or does it feel like there is no more news anymore? I mean, ever since the election, okay, yes, there's COVID news, but it's like 1 or 0. It's like we're either going to have more lockdowns or we're not. It's like one sentence news. And then there's obviously no more. I mean, there's vague political news, but suddenly there's no scandals. And I mean, the conspiracy theory is that the media loves Biden and hates Trump, so they never publish anything good about Trump. They would never publish anything bad about Biden. One person came up to me and said, "James, can you believe what they're saying about Hunter Biden? okay, this guy was having sex with crack whores in China while smoking crack. Can you believe Hunter Biden did that? And my only response was, of course I believe it. That's exactly what I expect the son of a vice president and now president-elect to do, is have sex with crack whores in China. It would be more unusual to me if it was like a bus driver or a plumber doing that in China and being wined and dined by the Chinese leaders instead of, driving a bus. But now there's just nothing. Jay, have you seen anything about Hunter Biden in the news lately?
Nope, nothing. Well, we do see Joe Biden sprained his legs while playing with his dog.
Yeah, that's the news today, is that Joe Biden sprained his foot. And yeah, look, the latest news, I just Googled, and I'm on Google News. Here's 1 month ago. Smoking gun email reveals how Hunter Biden introduced Ukrainian businessman to VP dad. All right, that's the latest news? Oh no, here's one from 5 days ago. Computer repairman at center of Hunter Biden scandal. I thought they were going to say computer repairman having sex with a crack horse in China alongside Hunter Biden. Now, that would be unusual if that was the article. Like, what's that computer repairman doing in China? But yeah, so the small repair shop in Wilmington, Delaware, made headlines after they had blah, blah, blah. Since then, John Paul Mac Isaac, what kind of name is that? He's like named after the Beatles or something. His name is John Paul Mac Isaac, has since closed down his computer repair business, leaving a close sign in the shop's window. Wow, he's gotten death threats. That's odd.
Everyone's getting death threat right now.
Why would he get death threats? I guess people don't want you talking about Hunter Biden. Maybe we should delete this part of the podcast. But anyway, no news is good news, and we're going to talk about Persuasion. I promise you will hear at least half of these and think to yourself, I had this technique would have been useful with my girlfriend or boyfriend or boss or whatever, because they're useful. Now, I was in a debate, and I've talked about this before. I don't write stuff with the idea to be controversial. Somebody did a video when I had the New York City is dead article, which, by the way, and I've said this also before, the news about New York City, unfortunately, has gotten today in the New York Post, there was an article about how up to 1/3 of New York City businesses have closed down. New Jersey's actually in worse shape. I hope there's some sort of bailout that helps. I don't know what will help, but we've talked a little bit about solutions here. And when I wrote that article, someone wrote that, I was just trying to be controversial. And I've mentioned this. If you write just to be controversial, then you're not a writer. A writer writes stories, and it's very important to keep that in mind. And if everything you wrote was, if you just took the opposite opinion about everything, you would be like the most boring writer. Nobody would ever read you. But I explained in the article that I loved New York City, and I wanted it to succeed and not fail, and I felt people were in denial. So that was one example of being controversial. The flip side of when you write, you should have a unique opinion. It is important to have a unique opinion. And if you're just writing the same thing everyone else is writing with nothing new to say, and I think that's what most articles are, is then what's the point? Then you're not a good writer. You're not saying anything that's adding to the knowledge of the world. You should be reading and listening instead of writing and talking in that case. But I've written many articles that, just stating my opinions, and some people agree with my opinions. Some people don't agree with my opinions, and I respect that completely. So I wrote an article about why I wasn't going to vote. I didn't intend to convince anybody else not to vote. I'm going to have more on this in a little bit. And I totally understand why people think it's important to vote. So I was invited to participate in a debate where the other side was going to talk about how it's potentially even morally wrong to not vote. And, my basic argument there is, I just want to handle the moral issue for a second. In the United States, we have the right to vote. And a right is different. We have the right to vote, and we have the obligation, for instance, to pay taxes. We're obligated to pay taxes, and we have a right to vote, which means it's not an obligation. It's a right. It's a privilege. So I could choose to do it, but it's also, I have the right to not vote. That's the definition of having the right as opposed to an obligation. Now, we're going to have some intermissions in this podcast, by the way, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about taxes and Jesus in a second. But first, the main issue here is I was in this debate. The guy I was debating, quite honestly, I'm not going to insult him or anything. He's a good guy. I know him by coincidence. We were Facebook friends. He just wasn't very persuasive. He wasn't using good persuasion techniques. It was almost like trivial to debate because it wasn't really getting to the issues. But okay, let's talk about the techniques. So one thing that people tend to do when they feel they're losing an argument, they zoom out and make it about something else. So for instance, we were talking about whether it's important to vote or not in the United States in a presidential election. And this person said, he started off by saying it's wrong to not vote. And then his first argument was, when you have an election with so much at stake, like, racism and other issues. And I said, hold on a second. Are we talking about the 230-year-old institution of voting, or are we debating about racism? Because I'm happy to debate about racism, but let's just make sure let's define what we are debating about. If we're debating about racism, let me know, and that's what I'll debate. But if we're debating about all the elections and voting in general as a right and whether it's wrong or not to not vote, then let me know. So that's zooming out. And what I did there also, and I'll talk more about this, I labeled what he was doing. And right away, it works because right away he said, no, let's stick to voting. And there was a bunch of people involved and everyone said, yes, the moderator said, let's stick to the voting question. That was number one, zooming out. Number two, question assumptions. So one thing this person said, to be honest, I don't remember the exact words, but let's say he said this. It's scientific fact that voting reduces inequality. And another person said, because different people in the audience were allowed to talk, another person said, you can't change the system if you don't vote. And so I just asked a simple question. Is that true? Is it true you can't change the system if you don't vote? Like, I didn't know the answer. And, part of engaging in a conversation is that you have to listen. And if someone says something that you don't know, it's fair to say, is that true? It's okay to not know things. I'll tell you, whenever I go on TV, like let's say CNBC or something like that, you're not, and I don't want to use CNBC as an example, but heck, I'll use it. It's not okay to say, I don't know, if you're a news pundit on TV. They don't really like it. You're supposed to know everything, which is BS because no one knows everything. But in a debate or in a conversation, I think it humanizes you a little bit, and it shows that you're listening. If you ask, is that's true? If you really can't change the system if you don't vote, then I might change my mind about voting. By the way, you shouldn't engage in a debate if you're not willing to change your mind. Now, I mean, obviously there's some things you're not going to change your mind about, but I'm the sort of person who tends to believe whoever the last person I spoke to is, which is part of the reason I'm vigorously alt-center. I'm actually kind of left of center, but the alt-left, when you're just left of center, they practically think you're a fascist. So this has been a weird time. In any case, these two statements, you can change the system if you don't vote, and someone said it's a scientific fact that voting reduces inequality. It's okay to ask, this is the question assumptions technique. Is this true? What is the evidence of this? Now, obviously, these two things are not true. Voting does not reduce inequality, and I don't know how they got that. And you can't change the system if you don't vote. That's not true. What if Joe Biden didn't vote? He's going to change the system, and I'm assuming he voted, but it's just a weird statement. Like, you're not allowed to do anything if you're not one out of 150 million voters. But asking the question, is this true, stops the train of their thought and forces them to take a step back and either produce evidence, which maybe will win the debate for them, or they have to be more specific about what they're saying. They have to say something that's true, or they have to say, well, I don't know. And then that particular argument is wrong. This happens all the time when I was just having, not an argument, but a discussion with Robin. She said, in my office doing podcasts every day from 8 a.m. till 6 p.m. And I'm like, is this true? What is the evidence of this? And so now she's keeping a calendar of all the times when I'm in my office Fortunately, at 1 o'clock today, stepped out of my office and I said to her, let's take a walk around the block. So now she can't say this about today. So anyway, question assumptions, technique number 2. Now, this is a key one. Don't let them straw man attack. So a straw man is when they take a weaker subset. So there's a lot of people who don't vote. Okay, 150 million people voted and something like 100 million eligible voters didn't vote. 100 million people. So a straw man is when somebody takes a weaker subset of the non-voters in this case and tries to make that weaker subset include you. So someone said, people not voting, it's the same thing as if they're saying they don't care about my rights. Again, a straw man is when someone takes a weaker subgroup in the category being debated and tries to generalize it to the entire group. Perhaps there are non-voters who don't care about a person's rights. But are all non-voters people who don't care about rights? No. I mean, I care about rights. It's one of the reasons why I care about the right to vote. I'm glad we have the right to vote. I want there to be equal rights, civil rights, every kind of right. I'm in favor of all the rights and none of the wrongs. But don't let someone straw man attack you, which is to put you in a subgroup of the whole category. For instance, your boyfriend says to you, you're always going out at night. Are you? And I never know where you are. Anytime I've met somebody who does that, it means they're cheating on me. Well, that's a straw man attack. Like now, it's no longer about whether you're going out at night. It's about whether you're cheating. And so you have to recognize when someone's using a straw man attack on you, and you have to call it out. So in this particular case where someone said, if you don't vote, it means you don't care about my rights, I had to say, well, I actually very much do care about your rights, but you can't say all 100 million non-voters don't care about rights. This is all related, but don't let them change the topic. So in this particular debate, someone said, this is the most important election ever. And one thing I said was, are we debating this election? And again, I said this, or are we debating voting, which has been around for the entire U.S.? Or is this about this one election we should vote, or is it about how one should always vote? So always call out when two sides are debating two different topics. This happens all the time in relationships. Like maybe one side is saying, this weekend, the kitchen was a mess. You didn't clean up any of the dishes and I got resentful and you're always lazy. Is this about being lazy or is this about not cleaning up the dishes? So now, a lot of this is related to labeling. This is a very powerful technique. Always notice and then say when these things occur. Like all of the techniques above, always point out, hey, you just changed the topic, or hey, are we debating racism, or is this true? Notice when they say something that's an opinion, or notice when they're changing the subject, or notice when they're attacking you. So when I wrote this New York City is dead article, a lot of people wrote responses, and some people were pretty angry at me. They had curse words in the title, and they were like, this guy is not a real New Yorker. He doesn't have grit, whatever. That's called an ad hominem attack. If someone uses an ad hominem attack rather than actual reasonable discussion and logic, you say, you just insulted me. I thought we were talking reasonably about something. If you insult me, you automatically lose. So I started, and look, I was just reading, Woody Allen has this new autobiography, and I know, it's very controversial. I didn't really follow all the stuff that was going on when he was in the news a few years ago. I know he's married to his daughter or whatever, but the guy's made 20 or so movies. He's got an impressive career. He's kind of he was winning awards in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, 00s, and 10s for his movies. So I wanted to read his autobiography and understand his creativity a little more. And he mentioned how he never cares what other people think. Like he won 3 Oscars, including Best Picture. I think this was like in 1970 for the movie Annie Hall. He said he didn't even go to the Oscars. He didn't even know he won until the next morning. And he thought about it for like 1 minute. And then he went back to work writing his new movie. And so I respect a guy like that. He doesn't care at all what people think. I do. And so when everybody was insulting me, my feelings were hurt. But then I just really focused on, it's a truism that if someone attacks you personally, they've already lost the debate. And if that's all anyone could do when they debate or argue or whatever, then they're not worth even responding to. But again, you have to label. So this is a very important one. I'm going to let you think about that one for a second. And I want to just ask the question and answer it. What did Jesus think about taxes? Did Jesus like paying his taxes? Jay, what do you think?
Well, I felt like Jesus is always about equality. I felt like he would have like a different tax brackets for different people.
Yeah, so if they like a progressive tax, you're saying. So like if you
Yep.
make more money, you pay more taxes.
Yes.
So someone asks him, this is in Matthew 22:17. Someone asks Jesus, tell us therefore, what do you think? Is it lawful to pay taxes to Caesar or not? And look, taxation was a huge issue because Rome would take over these areas, like in this case, Judea, which is modern day Israel, and Rome and Herod had huge taxes. So Jesus had a political opinion on this. He could have been a revolutionary. He could have railed against Roman taxation or advocated for the benefits provided by the taxes. But instead, he answered, and this is the famous quote, render therefore to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's. So Jesus said, pay your taxes. And why shouldn't he say? He didn't make any money. He just kind of roamed the countryside. And anytime he needed something, if he needed a glass of wine, he would just make it appear. It's hard to kind of pay taxes on that or mention that in your tax returns. Oh, I created 20 bottles of wine at a wedding. How do you get taxed on that? Anyway, next persuasion technique. So this is similar to the straw man attack. Don't allow a hollow man attack. So a hollow man is when somebody tries to equate you with people who don't really exist. So a hollow man is an invisible person that now you have to defend yourself against. So for instance, in this debate about voting, people kept saying, people died for your right to vote. I don't know anybody who died for my right to vote. I don't know anybody at all. Now, I'm not disbelieving it, but I said I didn't realize that if some invisible person died for my right to vote 300 years ago, then that means I morally have to vote. Again, I'm pointing out the technique. I'm pointing out that they use an invisible person to fight me. I can't fight back fighting is the wrong word. I can't convince an invisible person. I'm discussing the issue with visible people. If someone says, if you're arguing with your boyfriend and he says, oh, women are always like this, or if a girl says, oh, you're just like every other man, I can't defend myself against the entire species of men. Men are despicable, though, but that's besides the point. I wrote an article. This was a more controversial article than I thought it would be. In 2011, I wrote an article called "Why I Want My Daughters to Be Lesbians," and it was basically about how I know men, and if I was a woman, I probably wouldn't want to marry a man. They're disgusting. A lot of people were upset about that article. You shouldn't say that. What if your daughters become lesbians? Well, then they followed my advice. I'm pretty happy about that. So, but in any case, don't allow a hollow man attack or, defend yourself against that. Now, this next one's important. People will always give you a false dichotomy. What does that mean? So they might say, you either vote or you're a racist. Let's say you either go to college or you're going to get a bad job. You either own a home or you're flushing money down the toilet renting. These are not true statements. Like, it's not true that you either vote or you're a racist. It's not true that if you don't go to college, you won't get a good job. But these are often arguments people make. You'll go out with me tonight if you love me. It's an argument people sometimes make. It's a false dichotomy. This is just an opinion. But you have to call it out or else you'll be stuck trying to argue you're not a racist when the actual argument is about voting. So that's a false dichotomy. The other thing is, don't allow fear techniques. Someone might say, at stake is our humanity. Or if you don't go to college, you're going to end up, broke and struggling and you're going to regret it for the rest of your life. All of these things are impossible to prove and uses fear to make an argument. So, for instance, for voting, here's what you should say. There have been many important votes where many thought that was true, that at stake was our humanity, but it's never true. Fear is not an argument, nor is fear the right way to create a rational argument. I did a little bit of a study. I went to newspapers.com, which is an archive of all newspapers going back hundreds of years. And I searched on every single election, and I searched for the phrase, the most important election ever. That phrase, the most important election ever, was used to describe every single election. So don't allow fear techniques in an argument. Now, again, a lot of these are techniques that are defense techniques. My assumption is that you've thought out your reasoning, your rationalization, and your facts about what you're trying to communicate. You're not going to have persuasion techniques if you don't really have something worth persuading. You have to make sure you have something worth persuading. But the key to persuasion is to not be manipulated or sort of shoved into some alleyway, persuasion alleyway that you don't want to be in. So this next one happened a lot with the New York City is dead article. So this technique is called anecdote is not argument. So if someone says, this is what some people said to me, oh, New York City is beautiful now. Everybody is dining outdoors. It's like Parisian culture. I was just outside. People were playing music and juggling in the street. That's great. I'm glad that New York City has those things happening, and I've witnessed it myself. But it's not relevant to the economic issues that I bring up in my original article. So in terms of like this election, people were telling anecdotes all day. Like Twitter and Facebook must have made so much money. Every time everyone hit reload, oh, someone's arguing with me. This troll, this anonymous person disagrees with me. Everybody was like all day long on Twitter arguing the election. And listen, it's very important. You are what you put your attention towards. If you watch birds all the time, you probably should be an ornithologist. If you constantly play golf, maybe you should be a golf pro. If you argue on the internet all the time about the election, you're probably just a piece of shit. Like it's just the reality. So anecdotes are not going to convince anyone that your argument is correct. Now, this is a good positive technique. And so this is one that often works in comedy. So if a debate is in front of an audience, or if you're doing comedy, or if you're a lawyer and arguing in front of a jury, or if you're negotiating a deal, you want to tribe build. In a debate, you might say, we're all interested in this question for the same reason. You know, we want to make a better society. We want to make informed choices. We would like to reduce crime. We want the best leaders. In comedy, this could be useful. You might talk to the crowd a little bit and you say, oh, you're from Canada? Me too. What street are you on? You're building a tribe with the audience. Even when you're selling a company, you might say, when you're making the pitch, hey, this partnership can help us all bring down Amazon or Google, some competitor. So it brings you guys together so you're no longer on opposite sides of the table. The goal of tribe building is to take the kind of mythical table that you're supposedly on opposite sides of and make sure you're all sitting on the same side of the table. Oh my gosh, I love these clothes. Mizzen and Main, that's Mizzen and Main. It really is the most comfortable work clothes. Travel clothes. I had to travel this whole week. I'm traveling for a week and a half, and I just took Mizzen and Main clothes with me. Close out 2023 in style with comfortable, breathable, packable, and machine washable pieces from Mizzen and Main. As you wrap up your year-end goals, enjoy a Mizzen and Main dress shirt that you can wear confidently. I like that they've very, very just nice, solid colors. I don't really like to get all fancy in patterns and everything, although they do have some pattern shirts, but very comfortable clothes, stretchable pants. It's just super comfortable, but they look professional, and you can wear them casually or professionally. I like some of their flannel shirts or untuck shirts. I love untuck. I never tuck in. So again, whether you're shopping for a special someone or giving yourself the gift you really want, I just buy myself gifts. Mizzen and Main is the perfect gift for any guy who works, travels, and or cares about looking and feeling great. As you could tell by my many photos across the internet, I care about looking fantastic. I'm practically a model. And let's be honest, every guy loves to look great. So again, shop now at mizzenandmain.com and save 20% when you spend $130 or more using promo code James. That's promo code James at Mizzen and Main, Mizzen and Main.com. You know what I love about fantasy sports is that even though I'm not going to be a great basketball player or a baseball player or a football player or whatever, I feel like I get to participate and make decisions and use my knowledge of these different leagues or these different sports to compete. So it's like I can pick my team or I can pick my favorite players and I could use my knowledge to make predictions and maybe even make money. So with the basketball season here, you can now pick combo projections across football and basketball from the Specials League on Prize Picks. This is a league created specifically for combo projections that include two or more players from different sports or leagues. Want to play alongside some of Prize Picks' favorite players like rapper Meek Mill and comedian Andrew Schultz, who's also been a guest on this podcast, and I've been a guest on his? You can now find community plays under the promos tab of the app to view entries for some of the biggest names in the Prize Picks community each week. Look, Prize Picks even offers a reboot policy so that your entries stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. For football and basketball games, if you have a player who exits the game in the first half and does not return in the second, that player is rebooted. Prize Picks is the only daily fantasy sports platform with an injury insurance policy. What? So I love playing it. I love anywhere where I can use analytical ability with my interests to demonstrate some skill and maybe make some money. And I like the game-like aspect. I do wish they had chess as a category on prizepicks.com, but I'll settle for what they've got. Maybe I should make my own fantasy chess league. But in any case, I love Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/James. Use code James for a first deposit match up to $100. That's the easiest $100 you're ever going to make. So that's prizepicks.com/James and use code James. Daily fantasy sports made easy. The future of learning is definitely online. Like, it's such BS that you have to spend $200,000 or take $200,000 in loans and go to some fancy school when it's useless. It doesn't guarantee you a job. Most employers, including me, do not care about degrees or grades or anything like that. We want to care that you love what you're doing, that you know what you're doing, in some cases that you have experience or that you're willing to learn. But people in general love learning and are curious. Like, the key to success is curiosity. And I think masterclass.com is the perfect model for online learning. I'm really happy they're sponsoring this episode. If you're going to give a gift, give the gift of learning. Masterclass makes a meaningful gift this season for you and anyone on your list, because both of you can learn from the best to become your best, from leadership to effective communication to cooking. Let me tell you some of the classes I've taken. I've taken comedy from Steve Martin. I mean, can you believe I can take a class from Steve Martin on comedy, or Judd Apatow, my favorite comedy director? I could take an actual class from him on writing. Wolfgang Puck on cooking. Dan Brown on writing, or Judy Bloom, who's been on this podcast, on writing. By the way, Wolfgang Puck also has been on this podcast. It's such a pleasure. I try to take classes all the time from masterclass.com. And whether you're watching Masterclass on TV or listening in audio mode in the app or on their site, the quality speaks for itself. It's like these Masterclass instructors are your own personal mentors that are going to help you reach the next level. How much would it cost to take one-on-one classes on comedy from Steve Martin or on chess from Gary Kasparov? You just wouldn't be able to do it. But it would cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. With a Masterclass annual membership, it's $10 a month. Memberships start at $120 a year for unlimited access to one-on-one classes with all 180 plus Masterclass instructors. So it's not just $120 for one instructor. You get all 180 plus Masterclass instructors. Boost your confidence and find practical takeaways you can apply to your life and at work. And if you own a business or are a team leader, use Masterclass to empower and create future-ready employees and leaders. That's the real education in today's world. So this holiday season, you can give one annual membership and get one free at masterclass.com/JAS. JAS, of course, stands for the James Altucher Show. So right now you can get 2 memberships for the price of one at masterclass.com/JAS. Masterclass.com/JAS. Offer terms apply. This is where we start to get into facts. Facts are the best persuasion technique, of course. Well, I actually like labeling a lot as well. If they're just giving opinions and you're saying, is this true? And they don't have any facts, they're not going to win the debate. But one of the facts that I did research is that when there is more voting, this applies mostly to local elections, but when there is higher voter turnout, it actually, the main effect that it has is that it increases the probability that the incumbents win. So the person who's already in office is more likely to win the more people turn out to vote. You could have all sorts of theories why that is, but that is fact. So you have to decide, is this fact relevant to everybody arguing we should all vote? I think it's relevant. Everybody should vote if they have informed, independent opinions and not were just spoon-fed their opinions. I mean, most people don't. If I did a little experiment. I asked people to tell me about Biden and Trump 3 issues they liked and 3 issues they didn't like and why. And almost nobody could answer these questions. And I don't blame them. I probably can't answer them. And one person said to me, if you want to change the political system, you have to vote. You only have to point out one counterexample. Like I pointed out, Frederick Douglass, who was an African-American leader in the 1800s, he was not able to vote because at the time, African Americans weren't able to vote, but he did change the political system. So that's a refutation of the fact. Next one, don't allow bad abstractions. If they say, if all people thought like you, ... then say, but all people don't think like me, and all people have never thought like me, and I'm not trying to make them think like me. That would be reverse vote shaming, and I'm against all shaming. Every single time, if all people thought like you about college, no one will go to college. Fortunately, not everybody thinks like me. If all people thought like you, nobody would vote. All right, fine. 156 million people voted, so clearly not all people think like me. One thing that it's important to do is go meta. Understand what are the hidden agendas behind what's being debated. Are we really debating something else? Ask who benefits from this debate. Is the issue for America really about voting, or is this argument a convenient distraction while there are bigger issues happening? So, there's lots of political issues. Should it really be the case that maybe there should be a 4-party system instead of a 2-party system? Should people be better educated on all the issues? Should people understand what's going on in China or the Middle East or climate change or whatever? So perhaps the elites in power like the debate about voting because any one vote is insignificant compared to the real impact each individual can have on society. So you could write a book and you'll have a much larger voice than just casting a vote. But it's almost, hey, let's distract everybody so they don't write books and that disagree with us and try to change the system. So find the hidden messages in the marketing of what's being debated. For a lot of people think it's crazy for me never to buy a home. I always like to rent. But is there a higher agenda? For instance, there's a $15 trillion mortgage industry run by the banks. That might be part of the higher agenda that is part of the marketing that convinces everybody that, owning a house somehow is people think it's a right or a must. If you're having an argument or a negotiation, this is such a powerful technique, actually. This is in a debate, but what are the rules for winning the debate? If they say there is no way to defend not voting, then ask, if you can be shown at least one way to defend not voting, would that change your mind? Both sides have to provide a roadmap for how they can be proven wrong. That's important for any debate. Like if you just mindlessly say, well, clearly, Biden's a jerk or Trump's a jerk or he's a fascist, you have to ask, well, before we start discussing this, what would convince you to change your mind? Is there anything? If nothing, then fine. But if yes, then we can have a discussion that where we both might learn something. This works in negotiating too. If I'm negotiating a salary, let's say I want to hire a raise in my salary. My boss says, well, nobody in the industry makes as high as you make. Well, of course, we know what to ask right away. Is that true? Is that factual? And let's say it is true. You could ask, well, what is the path towards getting a higher salary? And if he says, well, you got to work here another 5 years, that might be the actual reason, and then I might quit. Or he might say, well, if you could show me that you're doing double the work of everyone in the industry, all right, fine. I'll show you I'm doing double the work. I remember one time I was negotiating the sale of a company, and we agreed that whatever I would make in advertising for the next year multiplied by a certain number would be the amount I would sell the company for. I had a certain number in my head about how much I would make from advertising during the next year. But that's when the guy I was negotiating with, he brought out all the facts, and it turned out he probably knew this in advance. He was a good negotiator. Turned out it was projected that I was going to make a lot less from advertising. But since I agreed to the rules for the negotiation, that's the price I was locked into. Now, I could have said no, but I still wanted to sell the company, and it was fine. But it was a good technique for negotiation. This I've spoken about before, this next one, and it's a very important technique. It's called steelman, and Charlie Munger also calls this invert. So you need to be able to argue their point better than they can argue it. So if someone is going to argue with me about voting, I should attempt to learn how to argue their side even better than they can argue it. So when I'm preparing for the debate, I have to ask myself, well, if I was debating me, what would I say? And so, for instance, what if one vote did make the difference? What if, you lived in a state or a city or whatever where one vote could potentially decide the election? That would be an important reason to vote. And you don't really know in advance if one vote's going to decide things. Another thing is, what if voting would encourage people to be more engaged, more part of the community, more familiar with issues? What if there's evidence that more voting makes you more knowledgeable about society and the issues in life? What if evidence that voting actually makes life better because you feel great to be part of a community? That's how I would probably steelman or invert the argument. But again, if you're arguing with your spouse, if you're arguing with your boss, always steelman the argument. Teach people, like if someone's debating against me poorly, you should be able to say, listen, you just did an ad hominem attack. How about you say, instead of just insulting me about New York City is dead, how about you say, listen, London has been bombed. Paris was effectively shut down for years from the plague and the 30 Years' War and all these other things. Rome was sacked by the Huns and torn apart. If all of those cities could survive, New York City could probably survive. So that's a way I'd steelman that New York City is dead argument. All right, this is a good one. Shaping. So a lot of the techniques I've been describing, not all of them, but a lot of them have been about defending yourself against manipulation. There's been some that have been positive, meaning, kind of going on the offensive, but this one is very much on the offensive. This is called shaping, and it's a very strong cognitive bias that you could subtly trigger against your opponent, your boss, if you're negotiating, your spouse or your friends or whoever. Basically, you're going to say their qualities that you want them to have. You're going to shape their qualities. It's going to trigger a cognitive bias. So you could say, for instance, in a debate, the audience is here because they feel it's important to work for a better, more fair system. Or the moderator, I want to congratulate the moderator for asking balanced questions and staying on point. Or you could say, I'm glad my opponent and I are open-minded enough to consider that the other side might be correct. Shaping triggers a cognitive bias to act in the way shaped because nobody wants to disappoint. Oh, they recognize these very good, honorable qualities in me. I better make sure I exhibit these qualities. In comedy, you might say, thank God the lockdown is over. I can tell you guys are out to have a good time. And so now they want to have a good time. Or if you're selling a company, you might say to the person buying your company, I want to work with you, most importantly, because I only work with honest people. So now you're trying to shape them to be honest. Does it work all the time? No, none of these things work all the time. But I will tell you, this is an extremely This technique is so powerful. It's almost like magic. When you shape, people do act like the qualities. Now, you wouldn't say qualities that are completely the opposite of them, but shaping is very powerful because they're not going to want to disappoint you. The shaping is one of the most powerful ones. Shaping, inverting, going meta. I mean, all of these are very important. I would encourage you to labeling, understanding what a straw man attack is, understanding what the zoom out technique is, understanding a hollow man attack, a false dichotomy. These are very important persuasion techniques. It's very useful to understand all of them. Some of them you'll use to persuade, and some of them you will use to defend yourself against being manipulated. You're going to be on the defensive more often than you're going to be on the offensive. Why is that? It's because most people don't have any facts. Most people argue because of emotions. They argue emotionally. And when they do that, they start insulting you. They start with false dichotomies. They start using fear techniques, hollow man techniques. They change the topic. If they feel like they're losing, they quickly change the topic in ways that you didn't realize. So you have to be totally aware of these in order to defend yourself. You're not going to be able to think of these techniques on the fly. You're not going to realize that they're happening to you when they're happening because it's going to be very emotional, very intense. So you have to be aware that these techniques exist. So let me see. We had one diversion, which was talking about taxes and Jesus. What about another one? I always think this is a very interesting thing about creativity, that when you think about Einstein, for instance, Albert Einstein was a very creative guy. He would do these what he called thought experiments. He would imagine, for instance, what is it like if a man is running the same speed as the speed of light? Like what would a ray of light look like to this person who is running as fast as the ray of light? And he was very creative, and that would help him come up with ideas about the universe. And then he would use the math of physics or the physics of math to prove his point, or write a paper about his theory. But people, if I ask you, what did Einstein do? You might say E equals mc squared. You might say the general theory of relativity, the special theory of relativity. But that's basically it. You would think Einstein's only done one or two things in his life. The thing that prevents people from being creative is often, and this is a cliche, but it's often perfectionism. They don't realize that Picasso has painted or drawn 60,000 works of art. You might know about a dozen of them, but he drew 60,000 works of art. Einstein, guess how many papers Einstein has done? 319. 319 papers. So what did he write about? Well, here's one on bivector fields, part 2. Here's one on the work and personality of Walter Nernst. I don't even know who that is. Here's one on gravitational equations and the problems of emotion, part 2. Here's generalization of Kaluza's theory of electricity. So again, probably these papers are nonsense, but the way you create quality is to create quantity. When people say idea, this is related to the thing people always say, oh, ideas are a dime a dozen. That's fine. Come up with dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens of ideas, and there might be one good one. There might be one E equals mc squared, but you have to do a lot. Like, I was just reading about Ryan Reynolds this morning because I think he just got engaged. He's an actor.
Ryan Reynolds, he married a long time ago.
Oh, okay. Well, I don't know. There was something about all the women he's dated. So of course I clicked on that and read all about it. So I don't even know if I've ever seen a movie with Ryan Reynolds in it. Like, well, he was the Green Lantern, right, Jay?
Yeah, he was Green Lantern. He is a Deadpool.
He was in Deadpool, right?
He was a Deadpool.
So he's been 2 superheroes.
Yeah, he was Deadpool twice, actually. He was Deadpool in the Wolverine with Hugh Jackman, the origin, I believe. And then he is the new Deadpool now.
He's the old Deadpool and the new Deadpool. Yep. So okay, I'm just looking at, he's got a whole Wikipedia page called Ryan Reynolds Filmography. And he's been in, I'm just going to count it up. He's been in movies ever since 1993. His first movie was Ordinary Magic. I can't even think of, what's the first movie? Maybe he was in The In-Laws. That's the first movie. I always in Harold and Kumar Go to White Castle. He played male nurse. But anyway, he's in 1, 2, 3, 4.
He's in a bunch of movies.
Yeah. Oh my God. More than I can count. He's been in like 40 or 50 movies. And then he's been in like another 20 or so TV shows. And then he's been in video games. So like, again, I knew him from one movie, Green Lantern, maybe another one. Maybe I saw The Proposal. Yeah, I saw The Proposal. That's with what's her name, Sandra Bullock. And he Deadpool 2 is the highest. I didn't know this. Did you know this, Jay? Deadpool 2 is the highest grossing R-rated film ever.
That I didn't know. I mean, I could imagine. Like I would.
$785 million for Deadpool
Wow.
2. Man, that's gross.
I mean, like Deadpool 1 was amazing. So people would just go to see Deadpool 2. Deadpool series, movies is great.
Now let's who's like a famous writer? Let's see, like John Grisham. Or no, let's do Danielle Steele. Let's see. How many books has Danielle Steele written? I'm sure it's uncountable. First off, she's made 25 movies. 25 of her books were made into movies. Let's see. Oh, I have to go to a separate Wikipedia page. List of works. I wish they would number them.
Yeah, they did. It has written 185 books.
185 books. Gosh. So again, don't be a perfectionist. Just start. Just anything you want to do creatively, just start. Anyway, that was 21 persuasion techniques. Jay, was there anything else I was going to cover? Oh, I didn't even do all 21, but that's fine. I did the best ones. I did about 19 of them.
Well, if they want to read all the 21, they can find it on your LinkedIn page, right?
Yeah, right. I wrote about this on my LinkedIn newsletter. Subscribe to my LinkedIn newsletter. Subscribe to this podcast. By the way, final topic is, you know what? I'm going to save this for the next video, which is what will the season finale of 2020 look like? So stay tuned. Let me know if you like these kind of off-the-cuff, more educational, how-to podcasts. Like, I always experiment with many different things, and then I write down what I learned, and then I like to share it. So it was fascinating to me, all these different techniques that not only did I use all of them in this debate, but I noticed that I've used them in arguments, in negotiations, even when talking to my children. So, it's very useful, these techniques, and I'm glad I know them, and I'm glad I was able to share them with you. Now, I'm going to go back to trying to find articles. Actually, you know what? I'm not going to look for articles about Hunter Biden. I'm going to get back to pre-2020. I really want to read more about Meghan Markle. Like, what's happened to Prince Harry and Meghan Markle since they quit their family? Did they still quit the family? Are they still together? I think things are going to return to normal when we're all talking about Meghan Markle again. So, Meghan Markle, wherever you are, I hope everybody starts talking about you. Thanks.
The McNugget Buddies are back. But this time, they got a fresh look as part of the new Kerwin Frost box at McDonald's. We're talking all new buddies, dressed head to toe in the freshest fits, all designed by the artist Kerwin Frost. So when you order the Kerwin Frost box with your choice of 10-piece McNuggets or a Big Mac, you'll get one of the flyest McNugget buddies to go with it. Think you can collect them all? Ba-da-ba-ba-ba. I'm loving it.
At participating McDonald's for a limited time while supplies last.